Hey guys, welcome to my first DCS a10c tutorial video. Today we're going to do the cold start procedure, basically starting the aircraft from a depleted power stage. Yep, right now obviously we're saying the a10c, and let's start. Let's go ahead, do this. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to switch the battery on here on the right console. This allows DC power to be basically drawn from the battery, okay? And it supplies the DC essential and auxiliary buses, and that's important because later on we're going to use the APU, and that is part of the engine sequence. So and the APU is going to draw from these DC buses to start itself. So I won't get too technical, but that's the basics of that. Next up in the sequence here is the inverter switch will be set to standby. That's going to power basically the instruments. It's going to invert that power to the APU. Simple process. It's 1, 2, 3 step. And while power is provided to most of these simple instruments here, you'll notice that a lot of these caution lights are actually on. This is a good time to check our signal lamp test. So as we press it, we're going to pan around and just look at each of the caution lights, make sure they're all working, and it seems to be good. Next thing we'll do, we're going to make sure this totalizer, fuel totalizer, is working well. It should read about 6,000 in total once we press it. That's good. And next, let's just set up our oxygen. Want to make sure the fuel's flowing through that window, or rather the oxygen. Okay, that's good. And we want to test the indicator, make sure that we will get a warning once it gets low enough. Okay, that's good. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and start the APU for the engines. And that starts right here. We're going to start these AC generators. And we're going to pan over here and make sure these boost pumps are on for the wing and the bane. Alright. Down here, we're going to have the APU start. It's set to off. We'll turn that on because that's what's going to power the engines. You hear it spool up in the back. Make sure the engine operation is on normal. So it's normal. Okay. So once that's up and running over here, we're going to turn the APU generator on. Now the EGT down here, this is the gas temperature of the APU. It will spike at 720 degrees Celsius at first, but then it's going to normalize around 400 degree mark. Okay, that's what you're looking for. Now once that's set up, we're going to go ahead and set up the radios. Usually have, well, not usually, but you always will have two VHF radios and one UHF. It's located on the left console in the back here. Your VHF radios will primarily be used for friendly flights, JTAC, AWACS, and your UHF radio will primarily be used for your wingman to communicate with that guy in your flight. It's not so important right now to put in your presets or your frequencies, but I would recommend having it set to transmit and receive for now, and put it on the main, just power them on, because right now we're just dealing with the startup, not so much the radios in this video. So once that's done, you can head over here on the right console. We have the AAP, the auxiliary avionics panel. And that consists of the CDU and the EGI, which is the embedded GPS INS navigation system. we're going to switch those on. It's our primary navigation system for the A10C. It takes approximately 4 to 5 minutes for it to align. So you want to start this early on in your aircraft startup, so you can have time to do other things such as engine start and your CICU and MFCD displays and your bit tests for the HUD. So like I said, we're going to go ahead and start our engines. Now there's two twin engines on this aircraft, the T-34-100A engines. You start them one at a time, and you will draw power from your APU, which will power these engines. And once the engines are powered up, you can turn off the APU because you no longer need those. So we'll start by turning the left engine on, and we're going to monitor our gauges right along here. And we'll also monitor the hydraulics left. Okay. So let's turn that on. Alright, so we just turned on the left engine, and we bumped that to 56 RPM, 56,000, which is our idle position. You want to monitor your left gauges here. So you want to look at your left hydraulic indicator. Typically that's going to normalize around 2,800 to 3,300 psi, which is normal. Don't mind the warning. The warning's only coming on because the system is recognizing that we have the engine on and we still have the APU on, but we won't turn the APU off till we turn the right engine on. So we can actually turn that off right there. And the engine temp will spike to 900 degrees Celsius, but it will stabilize between 275 degrees Celsius and 800 degrees Celsius, which is a pretty big window, but those are the normal readings. Once everything's stabilized and in their natural ranges, we're going to go ahead and start the right engine. We'll look for the same thing. We'll close the canopy as well, because it is getting loud. So while the engines are spooling up, it's a good time to check our trim and our flaps. You want to watch the hydraulic system for that. Our flaps will try real quick. And our speed brakes. Okay. That's good. We'll put these back into normal positions as they go. And once the engines are fully operable, butchering my English here, we can actually now turn off the APUs, but we will leave the battery on because that will be our backup energy source for that. So we did our trim check. You also want to make sure at this time your pitot heating is on. Not sure how to pronounce that. That's basically it's a heating system for our electronics, so they don't malfunction on us. But you need to keep in mind when you have it on. We'll typically have it on higher elevations, typically have it on in the winter setting, because if it is on for too long, it can overheat, which will lead to malfunctions. So we'll turn that off right before we taxi. Next, we're gonna turn on our MFCD's displays. These will give us, it's pretty self-explanatory. They're informative. They give us information. They have certain pages that we use to conduct missions. So do that by turning on the KQ. That's our central interface control unit. And we'll turn these on right here. So while we're waiting for that to load up, this is a good time to also turn on our I10c to test. This will allow us to run our pre-flight bit test. It's going to look for any faults in the system and let us know if there's any. So it shows up on your HUD, and we'll hit enter for that. And now it'll go through all its diagnostics, its tests, it's for lace and all that. A lot of aircraft gibberish. Refer to the manual. And now's a good time to also load our flight data. There's different ways and different places and sources you'll get your flight data from. You can make your own. You might have some provided to you in your mission briefing. That's a different lesson, but for now, it will typically load it now. And that will turn from a circle to an asterisk, which tells you that the data is loading. Once that asterisk disappears, it's all loaded, and you can convert that data into your, put it onto your TAD, and your flight data will be visible, ready to use. We're also going to turn on a couple more items on our armament HUD. JTRS will be on. It basically allows us to communicate with JTAC and see friendly forces on our TAD. Put TGP on. This is our targeting pod. It needs time to load and run its own flight bit test. We're also going to set up our countermeasure panel. Now there's different programs, that's a whole nother lesson, but for now we're just going to put it on standby. And our flight plan is visible. It's not yet configured to the way we want it, which we'll do in a bit. I'll explain that. So now we're going to finish the EGI setup. So once this is flashing here, INS nav ready, it's telling us that the alignment process is done. Just a matter of hitting our going from the ground to the nav, and we are in nav mode now. We'll also convert from HARS to EG, our embedded GPS INS. HARS is an outdated navigation method. It's used primarily as a backup in the a10c. That's, again, a whole nother lesson. But just for now, keep in mind that the IGI is our primary. So we'll always have that set. We're also going to set up our SAS. That's our autopilot panel. We'll have our skid off for taxi. Our flight bit tests, no faults were found, so that's a go ahead. It's good. So you can take that off the test mode, and it will bring up the HUD. AC's off. My bad. You got to be careful whether you right click or left click, because I accidentally turned the IFCC from test to off. So it was supposed to go from test to IFCC, but it's a quick, simple fix. And At this point in time, you pretty much have all your main systems configured. Your navigation's good. If you had weapons or anything you wanted to configure in the main profiles, the stat to check the validity of all your tests, pre-flight tests, I mean, you can go ahead and do that. At this point, you would just taxi to your radio, to control tower, using your radios here on the correct frequency, and request takeoff. So that's a wrap up pretty much for a quick, simple cold start procedure, the a10c. More videos to come. Thanks, guys.